So to get started with the scene setup for this one, we just have an icosphere in the center, subdivided 5 times, shaded it smooth, and then pointed my camera at the sphere. Then in my shading tab, I just have a 3D viewport set up, and then my node editor here. Then if I go to the cycles rendered preview, I can uncheck scene world, and I'm just using the built-in forced HDRI. And I have my camera view as, of course. Then I'll press new and type in my name for it. I'll name it Asphalt. And then over here, go to edit preferences and make sure you enable the Node Wrangler add-ons so you have all the shortcuts. And so just hit this checkbox right here and preferences and add-ons. Then to start this out, we're going to be doing some Voronoi textures. So we're going to press Shift-A and search for a Voronoi texture like this. Then we'll press Control-T. And then with this mapping node, we're going to take this object into the vector. So if we Control-Shift and left-click on this guy, we can preview what it's looking like. And currently, if we switch this to from F1 to distance to edge, we can see the shape that it's making. And these are shapes that we're going to be using, but we're also going to be warping them to make more round circular shapes. And to do that, we're going to get started by hitting Shift-A and search for a noise texture. We're going to place that in between the vector and the Voronoi like this. And then on this noise texture, we're going to switch the detail to a 4. Then we'll press Shift-A and search for a mix Rgb node. Put that in between as well. And then take the vector mapping into color 2. Then we're going to switch this factor up to a 0.8. So now we have these more rounded shapes and they're less defined. Anyways, now that we've done that, we're going to set up the base mask for our level of detail in the Voronoi texture right here. And to do that, I'm just going to duplicate this Voronoi texture with Control-Shift-D down here. Then I'm going to press Shift, hold right click and go over both of these to create this extra node here. Then for the scale on these guys, I'm going to be using a value node. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this, move them out of the way so it's a lot clearer. Shift-A, search for a value node here. Then I'm going to switch the value on this guy to a 50, just like this. And then take that into the scales of these Voronoi textures, just like that. Then we're going to hit Shift-A and search for a map range node. Like this, if you type in range, you get there faster. Put this on the distance to edge one. Take the distance into the value. Then from maximum value, we're going to drop that down to 0.1. And we can preview that that's just upping the contrast between these a lot more. It's bringing the whites a lot closer. Then on this Voronoi down here, we're going to switch this from distance to edge to F1. And then we're going to keep everything plugged in just how it was. So then I can Control-Shift and left click. I'm going to preview the color on this one actually. Then we can hit Shift-A, search for a math node here, place it right after. We're going to change the function on this guy to greater than, and then we're going to change the threshold to a 1. So currently, this is going to be encompassing the whole thing. It's okay. That's what we want for this one. If we put it to 0.5, we can see that it takes all the values that are 0.5 and higher and turns them to white. And if we lower this, obviously it changes. And we're using this for a mask, so we're going to change this value to a 1. Then this next step is to mix them properly. So I'm going to just grab all these guys and move them down here like this. Then hit Shift-A and search for a mix RGB. I'll place that right here. Then for the factor on this guy, we're going to be using our mask. And then for color 1, we're going to be using this guy. And then for color 2, we're going to be using a black. Just like this. So if we Control-Shift and left click now, we can see that it's encompassing the whole thing just as before. But the reason we're doing this is because we're going to have multiple levels of details and we're just going to duplicate these to get that. So for now, I'm just going to take all of these guys right here, the Voronois and the map range, and press H to hide them because we don't need to open them up anymore. And then I'll just go ahead and bring them down here so that it's nice and compact. Then I'm going to go ahead and select all of this right here, including the mix node, and press Control-J, and that's going to join all these together. Then I'm going to press Control-Shift-D like this, and it'll duplicate and move it up here. Then I'll hold Shift and right click and go over both of these guys and grab the extra node and pull them over here just so everything stays organized. So now that we have both of these, we have this one and then we have this guy. I'm going to switch this guy's scale to a 75. And then I'm going to take this color and move it into color 2. So now when we're previewing it, what it's doing is it's blending the two colors in. Except we need to change this value in to a 0.5 so that it's mixing them half and half. So now where the white is going to be taking in this previous mix node, and then where the black is going to be taking in this new map range with the new value. So it's just blending them in nicely like that. So then I'm going to select everything in the second one and press Control Shift D once again and move that up here. Then I'm just going to Control and right click to cut this guy off. Then take this mix node into color 2 and then up the scale here to a 100, just like this. So now if we Control Shift and left click to preview this last mix node, we can see that they're all sort of combining in a cool way. And obviously if I switch this to like a 1 or something, it would look really ugly like this. So just to show you that it is mixing properly, because all these values are really close, but they are different, which is what adds to the level of realism. And now that we've done that, we have all of our swirly shapes, but some of these shapes need to be more jagged. And so to fix that, we're going to select everything here. I'm going to grab it and move it down here, just like this, and also grab this guy down here. Then I'll select it again, and I'll press Shift D. Actually, I'll press Control Shift D, move him up here, just like this. And then I'm going to press Shift and hold right click to get this in between. Then I'm going to hold Control and right click to cut this off. So now we have our unwarped textures here, because these ones are the warped ones, and this one is not going to be. So then I'll take this vector from the mapping and plug it in up here. So now if we Control Shift and left click this top guy, we can see that these shapes are the more Voronoi geometric pattern, while these are the more organic pattern shapes. And then all we have to do now is blend these guys together. And then mix in some colors and stuff. Oops, I accidentally hit everything, then I hit everything. Anyways, now that we have that, we can actually go ahead and blend them. And to blend them, we're going to be using a Voronoi texture. So we'll hit Shift A, search for a Voronoi texture, just like this. And then we'll take this vector here into the Voronoi, Control Shift left click to preview. And I'm going to hit Shift A, search for a great math node, and then switch the function to greater than, just like this. Then we're going to take this color into the value here, leave it on a 0.5. So if we Control Shift and left click, we can see that it's working like this. And this is going to be the mask we use to blend all these together. So I'll press Shift A, search for a mix Rgb node, take this value into the factor, and then with this top guy up here, we're going to press Alt, right click on him, and then drag down to this mix node, and that's just going to plug it in into color 1. Same with this guy, Alt, hold right click, and then we'll plug it into color 2, just like that. And when you look at that, if we Control Shift and left click, it is combining all of these. Super cool and dandy. So now that we have this, we can factor it into the bump. So we'll press Shift A and then search for, oops, if I stop hitting Shift S, there we go, Shift A, search for bump node, take this color into our height here, then take this normal into the normal of the principled shader. So if we Control Shift and left click the shader, currently it's looking like this because the samples are low and it's upping. So we can sort of start to see the detail here. It is a pure white, so it's sort of looking not ideal. But yeah, once the samples start getting up, we can see that the asphalt is really coming in. It is all sort of the same color right now though. And so we need to change that because obviously there are different color pebbles and stuff in the asphalt. And so we need to be fixing that. And to do that, we're going to be using these same textures again, just with some extra mix nodes. So I'm down here, I'm going to press Shift A and search for a mix Rgb node. And then what I'm going to plug into this guy is the greater than into the factor again. But this time, instead of plugging in the map range, I'm going to take the color from this Voronoi into color 1 and change color 2 to a black. So what that's giving us is this. And then I'll press Shift D and move him up here. Do the same thing for this guy, the greater than into the factor, and color 1, the Voronoi color, just like this. And then color 2, the previous mix node. So I'll Control Shift and left click this guy. And so what we can see is it's giving us different colors for each value. And it's basically what that's saying is it's giving us different whites and blacks. And we're going to be using this as our randomization factor for the color so it looks nice and organic. So then I'll duplicate this mix node with Shift D, take this color into color 2, the greater than into the factor here, and then the color into color 1. So now that we've done that, we just have to do it for these top guys again. I'll take this mix node, Shift D, and I'll move him over here. Then I'll press Alt P to take him out of the frame. Take the greater than into the factor, color into color 1. You get the idea. So I'm just going to do that a couple more times real quick. Duplicate, greater than factor, color 1, previous mix node, color 2. And one last time up top, greater than into factor, color into color 1, mix node, color 2. So now we've done that for each of them. then we just have to blend them using the same method. So I'll take this mix node, Shift DM right here, and we're actually going to randomize it a little bit more. So to do that, I'm simply going to hit Shift A and search for a white noise texture like this. Then I'll take the last mix node here and plug that into the vector. Then I'll take this value into color 2. And then for the factor on this mix node, we're going to be using this greater than node once again, just like this. Plug him in here. And then up here, we're going to hit Shift A, search for another white noise texture. And I'll show you what this is doing because I didn't on the last one. So currently we are previewing the mix node and it looks like this. We plug it into the white noise, we preview it. It gives us a random value for each one or a random color. So if we preview the difference in the colors, it's quite significant actually. But yeah, it randomizes it further just so we don't get anything too predictable. So we're going to take this value into color 1 again. So now if we preview, we have random values for everything, which is going to be able to give us random colors for everything. Obviously, there's not going to be a rainbow. It's going to be random, like asphalt type colors, but you get the idea. So I'm just going to grab the principled shader and the material output and drag them over there a little bit just to keep them out of the way. So now that we've done that, this is our mask. And we're going to separate this into 4 categories. And to do that, we're going to be using some math nodes here. So I'll hit Shift A, search for a math node. I'm going to take him up here, change the function to greater than. And every value greater than the 0.75 here is going to be turned to white. So if I take this color into the value and change the threshold to 0.75, I'll preview, and it's going to show us every value over 0.75. Obviously, if I increase this, it's going to show us less and less white. So 0.75 here, because we're dividing this into 4 sections. Now, for the middle value, is going to be between 0.5 and 0.75. So I'm going to take this greater than, Control Shift D. Then I'm going to switch the threshold to greater than 0.5. But we also need it to be less than 0.75 because we don't want to be including everything. So I'll press Control Shift D again, change this greater than to less than, and change the value back to 0.75. So then I'll hit Shift A, search for a mix Rgb node. So if we mix these together and switch the blending mode to multiply, just like, not darken, to multiply, Control Shift and left click, switch the factor to a 1, we can see that it combines both of them, because just the greater than is this, and just the less than is this, and then we combine them, and we get this. Awesome. So now we have this next value. So I'm going to select all of these and press Control Shift D, move them down here. Then this time we want to be greater than 0.25, but less than 0.5. And so now we have this. And then this final value down there at the bottom, I'm just going to take these guys and grab them over a little bit just to give us some more space so we stay in sort of a linear motion across the screen. I'm just going to take this top guy here, or actually I'll take this bottom guy, Control Shift D, move him down here, less than 0.25 is the final mask. So now that we have our 4 masks, we just have to give each of them colors. And to clean things up a bit, I'm going to hit Shift and hold right click over these top 3 and drag that up here. Same on the bottom, Shift, hold right click, and then grab this top one. And then if you create an extra one by accident, you can hit Control X on it, and that'll keep the node path while deleting the extra node joint. Anyways, the next step is going to be mixing these ones in the middle, because on this top one, I want to have specific values, but on the middle one, I want to make it a little bit more organic. And it's really easy to do that. So I'll hit Shift A and search for a mix RGB. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this color into the factor, because it's our mask. If we Control Shift and left click this guy, we can preview it. I'll take this top color to a black, and then instead of having a random solid color right here, I'm going to take this color from our mix node that has all of our textures and everything, our white noise textures, into it and plug it in. So what that's doing is it's giving us a random value for each individual rock. And so that's going to be able to fix it into the blending of the color. So I'll just do the same thing for this one. I'll duplicate this guy here, take this color into the factor, and take this guy into color 2, so that now we have random values for each of them. If I zoom in really close, you can sort of see that they're not all the same. You can see this one's wider, and then some of these are darker than the others, like up here and stuff. It's sort of hard to tell, but it is making a difference. So now we just have to get our colors in here. So on this top guy, I'm going to hit Shift A, search for a mix node, and we're going to be adding our color into this guy. Take this value into the factor. Color 1 is going to be black. I'll Control Shift and left click to preview. And color 2 is going to be a hex value. And I'll go ahead and give that to you, and it'll be on your screen as well. It is a 929187. Again, that is a 929187, just like that. And this is sort of going to be our grayish, sort of hinted towards yellowish brown, something like that. And then the colors for these middle guys, we're actually going to use a noise texture so that they're not solids. So I'll hit Shift A and search for a noise texture here, just like this. Then I'll search for a map range node, plug this factor into the value. And then on this map range, I'm just going to take this from minimum to a 0.3 and then from max to a 0.7. And then I need to be plugging in the vector for this. So I'm just going to hold Alt and right click from the mapping into the noise texture. Then I'll hit Shift and right click, hit G to grab this up here, Shift right click again, just so that we have a clear path of where this is coming from. Then if I Control Shift and left click this guy, we can preview him. I'm going to switch the detail up here actually to a 10, just so we get some more variation. Then I'll press Shift A and search for a Mix RGB node. And these are going to be the colors that play into this. So I'm going to take this result here and plug it into the factor. Then I'm going to give you the color for this guy. This top value here is going to be an E2E3 E6. Again, that is an E2E3 E6, just like that. And then this color 2 is going to be a hex value of 6E685E. Again, that is a 6E685E, just like that. So now we have these colors in here. Then to factor that into here, I'm going to hit Shift A, search for a Mix RGB, just like this. Then this color is going to go into the factor. This is going to go into color 2, and then this top color is going to be a black. So if we preview this guy, we can see now that we have all of our colors blending in pretty nicely, just like this. However, you can sort of see the noise texture is a bit too big. So I'm going to go up here and take this noise texture scale and up it to like a 50. To keep everything smaller, I'll preview this map range to sort of get an idea of everything. Maybe a 50 is a little strong. How about a 10? Nah, we'll go with what's a 100? 75? And we'll go with the 50 on the scale for this noise texture. Cool. So we can sort of see the color happening here, and then mixing it in, we have this nice thing going on here. So now we need to do the same for this bottom guy here. So we're going to actually Control Shift D on the colors we just added here and move them down here. Then I'll hit Shift D on this guy, take this color into our factor, take this color into color 2, and we're going to be changing the colors on this one, obviously. This first hex value, I'm going to be using a B4, B5, B7. Again, as a B4, B5, B7, just like that. And then the second color is going to be a 686, A6E. Again, that is a 686, A6E. Just like that. So if we preview this X mix node, it's a bit darker than the other one. This one's a bit brighter. This one's a bit darker. Sweet. Now we just have to do this bottom guy here. So I'm just going to duplicate this top color node here and bring him down here, just like this. Take the value into our factor, and then color 2 is going to be a 757986, and then a 757986, just like that. So if we preview him, we can see this is a lot more bluer, and that is what we like to see. And now for the final step is bringing all these colors and combining them with a couple mix nodes. As you can see, we have a bunch of mix nodes here. This is a cool setup. So if you ever wanted to show your friends some cool node things you did, this is a pretty big setup, but a lot of it's just the same thing over and over. Anyways, you can hit Shift A, search for a Mix RGB node here. We're going to be combining these top two together. So we're going to take this color into color 1 and this color into color 2. Then the function or the blending mode, we're going to switch to add like this, and then the factor to a 1. So if we Control Shift and left click them, we can see that it's adding everything together like this. Then we're just going to duplicate this guy, move him down here. And we're going to be doing, oh wait, whoops, we brought in the wrong color for this guy. We're bringing in this color here. There we go, that's much better. For the colors, we're bringing in the top color node and then the bottom color result here, just to keep that clear, because I sort of messed up there. Anyways, we're going to be taking this color into color 1, the result of this plus this in the factor, and then this bottom color into color 2. So now we have this guy and we have this guy, and as we can see, they're not affecting each other. So we're going to hit Shift A, search for one last Mix RGB, switch him to add again and factor to 1. Take these colors into color 1 and color 2, Control Shift left click him, and now we have our asphalt colors. Awesome. Then for a little bit further adjustment, I'm just gonna hit Shift A and search for a Hue Saturation node, plug it in right after this add node, so we can adjust the hue saturation value really easily. And I think this is a little bit bright for my liking, so I'm just gonna take this value and move it down to like a 0.8. Cool. Then I'll take this color and plug it into the base color, Control Shift and left click on the principled shader, and we've got this asphalt going on right here, and it's looking pretty good. Then on this roughness here, we can play with that however we want. I'm going to go ahead and put it at like a 0.6, something like that, so it's not too reflective. Now that we have done that, if you want to call it quits and this would be the end of the material, go ahead and do so. I'm going to be adding in some cracks to give it a little bit more realism, and that shouldn't take very long, so we're just going to do that real quick like. So to start with that, I'm going to hit Shift A and search for a noise texture here, just like this. Then I'm going to press and get the vector in here. So I'll press Alt, right click, and drag them down here. Then just like the other one, Shift right click, grab these nodes, Shift right click again, and just to give us a clear path of where this is coming from. Then on this noise texture, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to switch the scale down to a 1, like this, the detail to a 10, and then leave everything else there. This is going to be sort of where our mask is of the cracks, so I'm going to hit Shift A, search for a math node here. I'll Control Shift and left click this guy, take this factor into the value, change the function to greater than, and change this value to a 0.505, like this. Then I'm going to Control Shift D, duplicate him, change this function to a less than, change the value to a 0.495, just like this. Then I'll hit Shift A, search for a mixed RGB, and then I'm going to add them together. So I'll switch this blending mode to add, factor to 1, take the values into each other just like this. So if I Control Shift left click to preview, we now have this cool looking cracks. Awesome. So now we can go ahead and take this guy, and if we want to, we can plug him straight into our bump, just like this. So we can hit Shift A, search for a bump node here. I'm going to put this guy in between the previous bump node. Then I'm going to take this color, plug it into our height. So if we Control Shift and left click on this bump node, we can see that we now have these nice cracks coming in here, and it's looking pretty sweet. So now if I Control Shift left click the principled shader, we can see that it's sort of not showing up very well in this lighting. So I'm going to pan around, see if we can get a better view of these cracks. And they're currently not seeming to pop out very easily. So I'm going to go to Layout View. I'm going to hide my sphere real quick. I'm going to collapse this, then I'll hit Shift A. I'm going to add a mesh plane. I'm going to scale it along the X real quick, and then scale it on the Y a little bit. Control A, apply the rotation and the scale. Then my material, I'm just going to search up asphalt, just like this, apply them. Then I'm going to go to render preview, so that we can get a nice look at what we have here going on with the street. So currently it's looking really good, but those cracks, oh, here they go. Once we get enough samples, the cracks start to show up. Nice. Awesome. So now that we've done that, I mean, you can call it quits here if you want to add a little bit of, you know, black paint where it looks like they've covered up the asphalt. We can actually go ahead and do that if you want as well. So I'm going to head back over to the shading tab just so that we can add that in, because I think that would be pretty cool. And I'm just going to take this and grab him, move him down here. Then with the, I'm going to Control Shift and D, move them up here. And then this is going to affect our color. So we want it to be a little bit bigger actually. So I'm going to switch this threshold to a 0.51. And then this threshold to a 0.49. Let's see how that looks. Sort of, maybe a little bit thicker, or maybe we need some fall off possibly. We'll go with this for now and see what happens. So now I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to search for a mixed RGB node. If I plug him in between the hue saturation and the principled shader, I'm going to plug this into our factor. If we can preview this guy, we can see that it's backwards right now. So I'm going to take this hue saturation into color 2. Then if we take this color 1, we can switch it to, say, a black or a dark blue, sort of like what they would have the tar going over. And currently this isn't looking very good because it's taking all of it. So in between the two, we need to sort of have it blend better. So I'm going to press Shift A, And then I'm going to search for a map range node, just like this. I'm going to plug that value in after this add node and take the 2 minimum value. And if I switch it to a 0.5, you can see that it sort of gives us a better effect. So I can actually switch this lower to see how much of this we want to be affecting. And this is kind of looking good because it's kind of like that stuff they put to cover up the cracks and everything when there's a, you know how that works, I guess. But anyways, yeah, those are what the cracks are looking like right now. Obviously, if we think it's painted a little bit too much, we can even add in noise textures to adjust the factor. But currently, I think I'll leave it on this just for this tutorial, just so it doesn't get too complicated. Obviously, if you think there's too many cracks going on here, you can go ahead and press Shift A, search for, let's say, a mix RGB, and then you can place that in between these guys. So Shift right click and then place that here. This will be color 2, and then this color 1 will be a black. Then I'm going to take this noise texture and press Control Shift D like this. Leave the scale on a 1 and put them into the factor. Hit Shift A, search for a map range node like this. Or actually, search for a greater than node. So go to math, change the function to greater than, plug it in between them. And so if we preview this guy, we can see where it's enabling the cracks versus taking them away. Now I'm going to take the roughness down to a 0, and then I'm going to up the scale to a 5. Or actually, I think a 2 would be good. So now, if I preview where our mix node's coming out, now if we preview where our cracks are like this, so we can go ahead and preview up here, we can see that we have them much more spread out. Obviously, we can change the effect of that. If we want more cracks, we can lower this value. Less cracks, we can up it. Crack scale, we can make them smaller. We can make them bigger by lowering the scale to like a 0.5, etc., etc. You know how it works. Anyways, with that said, I'll Control Shift and left click one more time. This is the finished material, and I'll go over the controls one last time. You have your color right here for the tar paint over your cracks. You have the Hue Saturation, where you can adjust basically how new your street is, like this. If you want it to be newer, I'd suggest lowering the value, maybe upping the saturation as well. If you want it to look older, lower the saturation to like a 0.75 maybe, up the value to like a 1.5, and this is a little bit too white, so maybe leave the value at something like a 1, and it looks sort of like an older, more worn out street. So yeah, that is the asphalt material, and hopefully you have enjoyed this and can use it in your renders, in the background or wherever, maybe even in the foreground if you think it looks that good. And so yeah, I'll see y'all guys in the next one. Adios.